So I made this video to help you to learn from my mistakes. I'm going to be going through all of my beginner mountaineering kit, talking about what gear works for what kind of climbing, and talk pros and cons, and hopefully you'll learn some lessons from my mistakes over the years. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Chase. This channel is all about preparing your mind, your body and gear so you can go further into the mountains, so you can challenge yourself and grow from that experience. And in this video, what I'm going through is my beginner mountaineering kit. I want to preface this by saying it really helps to understand and really know what kind of climbs you want to be doing, what kind of mountaineer you want to be. And there's a big difference, especially with the gear, between doing light alpinism and doing, your typical kind of trekking peaks in Nepal. And a lot of the times you're going to need winter boots, summer boots and technical boots, and the same goes for all the rest of the gear. So we're talking like the big five, so boots, crampons, ice axe, harness and helmet, and a couple of other little things mixed in there as well. Okay, first thing on my list is my boots, the Scarpa Phantom Techs. These are a single boot or a 1.5 boot. So there is kind of like an inner boot, but you can't fully take it out. So basically what you have is this like outer kind of built-in gaiter on the outside, which is mainly there to, keep the snow outside of your boot, but also it's there to protect your pants, because when you've got crampons on, especially when you're new to mountaineering, you're a bit clumsy in the crampons and you'll tend to like rip your pants. And if you've just bought, like $300 Arc'teryx Gore-Tex pants and you rip a giant hole through them with your crampons, you're not going to be very happy. So having a gaiter might be a good idea if you're new to this, but otherwise the gaiter in this boot is pretty durable stuff, and it's going to protect you from stabbing yourself with your own crampons. In terms of what they're made of, they're obviously not leather. This is completely synthetic. You have a very rigid plate through the middle of the boot here, which is made out of carbon fiber. You would think that carbon fiber would be light, but these boots are actually relatively heavy. I think one boot is a little over a kilo. Yeah, 2.27 kilos for both boots. So they are super, super heavy. In terms of what actually makes the boot warm, the lining, if you will, is made out of Primaloft. So very good thermal properties in Primaloft, pretty much known all around the world for their insulation properties. Also inside of the boot, I picked up, before I went to Mont Blanc, I got these gel inserts that I put inside the boot just to make things a little bit more comfy, because when you're standing around in boots all day, you want to be as comfortable as possible, and for an extra $10 or so, they are totally worth it. One thing that I realized when I got here to Spain is that pretty much everyone who climbs through the winter, they have like a winter boot and they have a summer boot. And being from Australia and really only ever doing some climbing in the Himalayas in New Zealand, the concept of having winter and summer mountaineering boots was just completely new to me. I mean, if you're living in the States, you probably know that already. But for me, being just a noob Australian and moving here, that was the one thing that I realized I'm gonna have to buy a pair of summer mountaineering boots. Sole, Vibram rubber, that's always a good sign. Vibram is obviously excellent on rock, and I've spent probably more time on rock than on ice, sadly, in these boots, but they are exceptionally good on rock, just crazy rigid. So what kind of trip would I recommend these boots for? Well, basically anything that is winter mountaineering, definitely if you're doing any ice climbing, like if you're just ice cragging, Nepal trekking peaks that are around sort of 6,000 meters or below, so Island Peak, Lobuche East. If you get cold feet easily, these might be a little thin for you. I'd probably recommend, in that case, going to a double boot like the Spantic. So winter mountaineering, ice climbing, and potentially usable in sort of colder spring conditions, but again, heavy boots. So if you're gonna do summer mountaineering, then go for something a little lighter. Next thing on the list is ice axe. This is the Grouvel Mont Blanc. This is the classic first ice axe for just about everybody. It's a glacier kind of walking axe, hot forged steel, made in Italy, Gravel are well known for making some of the best steel in the world. So a couple of things to point out. Firstly, you want to keep the tips protected. So this is actually a black diamond one, but look, these little tips will help protect the rest of your gear when you pack everything down. So good to have a couple of those. This axe actually comes with one built in there, so that is protecting the end tip. I've made a couple of little modifications. You'll see this, I have this kind of like ratty tape at the top here. Basically the reason why I've done that is because when you're holding steel in your hand gets incredibly cold when it's just, you know, gloves on steel, even with really good gloves. So what I've done is actually wrap like some Prusik around the edge here. What that does is put a little bit of a barrier between my hand and the glove and the steel. You always want to have your axe on the high side of the mountain. So if you're traversing kind of a big snow slope and the mountain goes up towards your left, you want to have your axe in the left hand, and you don't want to have to swap to the right hand just because you've got a cold hand. So obviously good gloves is an important thing, and I'm going to go through gloves in this video as well. If you're going across snow slopes, this is the number one thing that's going to save you. Learn how to self-arrest. It's an incredibly valuable skill in the mountains, and probably irresponsible if you don't know how to do that. Basically anything you do in the winter style kind of mountaineering courses where you're doing belaying off snow anchors and that sort of stuff, they're all using this type of axe. So any kind of walking based mountaineering you're doing will require a straight axe like this. So it's the perfect axe for a beginner. I will quickly talk about my technical axes. These are more obviously mixed ice climbing, dry tooling. I love these, they've got a nice bend to them. They've got a really nice hand feel. Wow, I should be really careful that I don't just axe the camera with. I'm going to put these down. Okay, let's talk gloves. Now I'm going to show you two different sets of gloves, well actually four. These are the gloves that I've had forever. Basically like big, hideous snow gloves. I can't tie rope while wearing them. I can't undo carabiners. Basically I can't do anything other than maybe put my hand in a Jumar and slide up a fixed rope. And that's kind of what I bought them for, you know, really cold winter conditions, but they are just super, super cumbersome. I don't really get a lot of use out of these gloves. So I think gloves is a super important purchase. I think there's one thing that you should really do when you're buying gloves, and is to do the one-hand carabiner test. Get out your belay device, and with your gloves on, try and screw up and unscrew your carabiner with one hand. If you can do that with the gloves that you're buying, then they are your gloves. They're amazing gloves. Get them. If they're comfortable, if they suit your hand, if you're dexterous, if you're able to use them, then buy those gloves, because they're really, really rare. I've been searching for a good pair of gloves for years, and this is my solution. This is the only thing that I've found that works so far. What I use now is literally a Bunnings Home Depot gardening glove. And what I do is I put a liner inside and then gardening glove over the top. And you know what? That passes the one-handed carabiner test, and I can do everything that I need. I can undo ropes, I can tie knots, I can manage carabiners, I can do anything that I need to do while I'm climbing, and I never have to take this glove off. And I ended up being far warmer with this skinny little shitty glove than I do with this overkill double glove, because I've constantly got to take this thing off to be able to manage rope. So I would really recommend either testing out a bunch of gloves using the little test that I showed you, try and find a good pair of gloves, or you could do the Home Depot option. I mean, I always have these in my backpack just in case if it gets crazy cold. You know, if I'm waiting at a belay station or something, I'll be like swinging my arms around, but also putting those gloves back on just to get them warm again. But for the most part, this does just about everything that I need, and it costs like $10. Okay, let's talk crampons. So when I bought these, I think in 2015, I don't know what I was thinking, but I went for the Gravel G14 crampons. So they're called G14s because they have 14 points, including these tiny little ones here. The front two are adjustable, so you can go back to a mono if you like. Sometimes when you've got the double points and you're trying to like get some grip on rock when you're climbing in shitty conditions and there's not enough ice, it's much more useful to have a mono because you find just a little edge that you can put one point onto. Having two often impedes that grip that you're getting on the rock. The other one kind of just gets in the way. So going with a mono can be really useful. Sometimes I'll have a mono on one and the two on the other. It just depends what kind of terrain I'm on. So I wanted that option to be able to change those over. What I sacrificed then though is weight. These things are crazy heavy. So 1.26 kilograms. There's definitely a lot lighter crampons on the market. Honestly, these aren't really beginner crampons. They are way overkill for most people. Heavy feet is really a big deal. There was a study that the Mountain Tactical Institute did a few years ago where they found, I mean, it's a small study, but they found that for every pound you had on your feet, that's the equivalent of 4 pounds on your back. So for every pound you have on your feet, you're basically expending like 4 times the amount of energy. I think if you want to minimize the amount of effort you're putting in and increase your speed, then the first thing you should look at is getting light boots and light crampons. And these are great crampons, don't get me wrong. They're basically indestructible. I'm gonna keep them forever. But the one thing that I did have to add is that extra extender bar. The La Sportiva Spantic boots that I used these with were so huge that I had to buy an extension bar. But it's great that you've got options like that to be able to customize these as you use them with different style boots. At the bottom, what are called anti-balling plates. So these little sections that are supposed to prevent snow and ice from collecting underneath your crampons. Do they work? Not all the time, to be perfectly honest. So I guess that's just part of the deal. I guess the good thing about these crampons is they can be used for pretty much any kind of terrain. They are really an all-rounder. You can use them for classic kind of mountaineering, but also for mixed and technical climbing as well. They're semi-rigid, so they've got some movement in them, but not too much. But I think the thing that I like most about them is that they're just totally bomb-proof and will surely last a long time. The helmet that I use on Mont Blanc, this is a camp helmet, a new one. I had to get a new helmet because people were commenting so much on how busted up my old Black Diamond helmet was. I've still got it. All that damage came not from falling rocks and stuff. It was from me just like headbutting like things as I was rock climbing. Yeah, nice to have a new helmet. One thing I did do is I just got my DJI Osmo and put my new action cam on my helmet, and so that's ready for some adventures. Okay, one thing that I'll glaze over really quickly is belay devices. So for mountaineering, this ATC, this is from Black Diamond, is all you need. If you're going to do some rock climbing though and more multi-pitch stuff, I would recommend getting the Guide Pro. The difference is that it just has this extra loop here, which is super handy for multi-pitch climbing, but realistically, this is all you need. And a couple of HMS carabiners. These things are bomb-proof, super dependable, have a great feel in the hand. I absolutely love them. They are my favorite carabiner. A little bit on the heavy side, I guess, but something about these carabiners, I always just trust a little bit more. They're my favorites. Okay, next on the list is a harness. This is from Wild Country. This thing, again, is absolutely overkill. I bought this as a trad climbing harness because it's got tons of gear loops. It's got gear loops all over the place. It is definitely not the best simple, classic mountaineering harness, I would go for something much lighter, much more simple if I was you and you were just doing some general mountaineering. Obviously this does the job though, and it allows me to do all kinds of mountain sports, but it really does none of them well. Well, it is a great trad climbing harness, but it's just so complex. When you're sitting in the snow, in the dark, trying to put this harness on, just because of the way it's built in this kind of like 4-section construction with all the webbing all over the place. The gear that I've bought over the last kind of 10 years has very much been always focused on, can it do all of the jobs? And that's the one thing that I really probably regret about a lot of the gear that I've bought, is that it hasn't been kind of specialized in one area. So my best advice when you are looking at making your first purchases for beginner mountaineering gear is know what kind of mountains you want to climb and buy the gear for that. Because the gear that I've bought, it's capable of doing everything, but it doesn't do any one particular style very well. So if you're going to do classic mountaineering, if you're going to be climbing 14ers, then buy gear for that. I hope that this has helped you with your buying decisions. If you got some value out of this, hit the like button. I would really appreciate it. And if you think I missed anything, or if you'd like to see more videos, hit the comments section and let me know what you think. I'll see you on the summit.